Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Indian Netizens and the Global Affairs and Diplomacy Research Center, I welcome you all to today's webinar titled Air Supremacy and Strategy, the IAF in a New Age. We are truly honored to have with us a distinguished panel of speakers, veterans, and thought leaders who have shaped and witnessed India's transformation into a formidable air power. This session aims to trace the evolution of Indian air power from its post independence origins to its current strategic role in regional and global geopolitics, and finally towards the future trajectory of aerospace dominance. Let me now take a moment to briefly introduce our esteemed speakers. We are honored to have with us Air Marshal Anil Khosla sir, who is a PVSM, AVSM, VM, and the former Vice Chief of the Air Staff, Indian Air Force. A veteran with over 40 years of distinguished service, Air Marshal Khosla has played a pivotal role in policy formulation, strategic planning, and force developments in the IAF. An accomplished fighter pilot and tactician, he has over 4,000 years of experience and has commanded multiple operational formations, including an operational base and Eastern Air Command. Since retirement, he has remained a prominent voice in the domain of aerospace power, joint warfare, and military transformation, frequently contributing to strategic think tanks and defense publications. We are honored to have with us Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury sir, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, VM, who is a decorated senior officer in the Indian Air Force and the former commandant of the National Defence College, NDC, New Delhi, one of India's premier institutions for strategic leadership. With a distinguished career spanning over 4 decades, with over 5,000 plus sorties, he has commanded frontline air bases and held key positions in operations, strategy, and training. He brings with him a unique blend of operational insight and strategic foresight, having mentored top civil and military leaders from India and abroad. He is the author of the book Indian Air Force Contemporary and Future Dynamics, co editor of the book Force in Statecraft and Indian Perspective. His expertise lies in future warfare, aerospace strategy, and India's strategic environment, themes that resonate deeply with today's session. We are also honored to have with us Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani sir, who is currently the Director General at the Center for Aerospace Power and Strategic Studies, CAPS, New Delhi. He is a distinguished veteran of the Indian Air Force with over 35 years of service, where he has held various operational, command, and staff appointments. A qualified flying instructor with extensive experience on fighter aircraft, he has been instrumental in formulating airpass strategy and operational doctrines. Post retirement, Sir has played a pivotal role and has actively engaged in strategic research and public discourse on air power and national security. His insights bridge both practice and policy, making him a vital voice in India's evolving defense landscape. We are incredibly privileged to have such a stellar lineup today, and we have been joined by Air Marshal Arora Sir and Group Captain Mathur Sir. Each speaker brings with them a legacy of leadership and deep insight into the evolution of Indian air power. We'll begin with the presentation shortly. A gentle reminder to our speakers, we have allocated 15-20 minutes per speaker, following by a Q&A session towards the end. Please feel free to go through your question to send in your questions through the chat box during the session. I now hand it over to Anjali to continue the session.
Thank you very much, Soumya. So, firstly, I would request respected Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani, sir. Sir, I humbly invite you to reflect upon and chronicle the evolution and strategic transformation of the Indian Air Force from the moment of our nation's independence up to the Balakot airstrike and beyond. Kindly illuminate the key milestones, doctrinal shifts, and technological advancements that have shaped the trajectory of India's air power across these pivotal decades. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Soumya, and thank you, Anjali. And I would like to thank Indian Netizens and the Global Affairs and Diplomacy Research Center for giving me this opportunity to speak. Though I would like to say that there are people far more qualified and eminent, more than me to speak to you all on these issues. But what I will do is, in the next 15 to 20 minutes, take you through the trajectory of the evolution of the Air Force as it came into being to where it is today, and what are the shifts that took place in its journey from its inception to its the centennial decade that we are in. So I just take you back a little bit before the partition of India, when the Air Force was formed on 8th October 1932. And the problem that the Indian Air Force had was to break out of the imperial straitjacket of being a subsidiary force, not to the Indian Army, like most of the air forces grew as adjuncts of the armies, but to the Royal Air Force, only to find itself under pressure in the subsequent years to get bogged down by this, and because the natural roles of strategic air power, that is bombing, interdiction and all, was left with the Royal Air Force. The initially it was the Air Force as it formed was circumscribed to only support the army and the coastal defense, and like I said, these roles of bombers and fighters were retained by the RF. And this Indian Air Force evolved into a strong and effective force because it was blooded in the Second World War, when it was defending the country against the Japanese invasion in the eastern part, and uh, we were fighting an alien enemy ruled by an alien country only on the promise or premise of being given independence post World War II. Now, immediately after partition, 1947-48, as we are all aware, the Kashmir war broke out, and it still date remains the longest war that India fought, which stretched all to more than 400 days, where the infiltration of 5,000 tribals from northwest frontier province and Muzaffarabad, from the Muzaffarabad, Uri, Gulmarg axis came to capture Srinagar, and this actually forced the hand of the Maharaja Hari Singh to sign the instrument of accession. Now, at that time, Mountbatten had supported the British service chiefs in their attempt to dissuade the cabinet ministers from undertaking the airlift due to great risks and dangers. And at Srinagar, actually, there were no navaids available, no landing aids, firefighting, and refueling facilities. The only aircraft that the Air Force had at that time was the Dakota DC-3, with a limited ceiling, no pressurization, and these aircraft would have had to operate in quick succession, which would, uh, be inherently dangerous because of the poor visibility, because there was no pakka runway, it was a kacha strip. And it was on 27th October that the first three Dakotas took off with troops of one Sikh regiment and landed just in time to prevent the Srinagar airfield and the city being overcome by the insurgents. And in a matter of a fortnight, by 11th November, almost 600 sorties had been flown, airlifting over 5,000 troops along with their supplies and stores into the valley. Now, while Mountbatten was full of support and praise for the effort, and wrote that in his war experience, he never came across an airlift of this magnitude and order being undertaken with such meager resources and in such a short time frame. And when you look at the Royal Indian Air Force fighters, they took extensive part in strafing and rocket and bomb strike and offensive recce sorties against the raiders and convoys, and subsequently airlift of personal weapons and food enabled the defense of Poonch. Baba Meher Singh, Air Commodore Meher Singh, legendary figure, and General Thimaya actually flew crossing mountains as high as 24,000 feet in an unpressurized Dakota without any oxygen on board. And both these officers had undertaken this near impossible mission and accomplished this exceptional feat against the orders of their respective service headquarters. Now, you know, according to Jasjeet Singh, the top political leadership at that time had a far clearer grasp of the military strategy needed and the role the Indian Air Force and the Army could play. But they were obstructed in its application by Mountbatten and the British chiefs of the newly independent India. And the senior Indian political leadership was quite clear on the expectations from AirPar, thanks to the dynamic and intrepid leadership which displayed immense courage, commitment, and resourcefulness of its men. And as you can see, AirPar played a vital role in independent India's first war. It was not only able to save the day on many occasions, but was also produce the strategic outcome of saving JNK. The fact that we went to UN and all is a subsequent issue which I will not cover. Soon after that, the next conflict that happened was the 1962 war. And the beginning of the 1962 war, the Indian Air Force comprised of 23 squadrons, which were 18 combat and 5 transport squadrons. And this is a defeat which still, rankles India uh, and its security establishment and its pride, and it in some ways affects our relationship with China till this day. Now, the reasons for not using the Air Force are many. Amongst them, the political leadership directly interfered with the appointment of the, leadership. The Air Force was kept out of the decision making entirely, and it was only used for logistics and non-combat role. The fear that air power would be escalatory, this fear was haunting the political leadership that the bombing of cities will take place, and there was also, the American ambassador Galbraith also dissuaded Nehru from using the Indian Air Force, and there was a clear absence of joint planning between the army and the Air Force. We can also say there were some reservations by the Air Force at that time, and the failure of the joint intelligence organization, bureaucracy, the higher defense organization, everything actually worked towards the non-employment of AirPA in the offensive role. However, in logistics and transports, this was used excessively. Now, this fear of escalation, in my opinion, was not totally unfounded because the cameras had been flying recce sorties over Tibet during this conflict. There was no opposition seen to the missions that the cameras were undertaking, and the Air Force fighters were flying sorties, from Western Air Command. They were kept on readiness, ORP readiness, and all. And the Chinese, that is the PLAF, was actually not there in action at all. And this terrain, the Tibetan plateau and all offered an ideal terrain actually for offensive action. And there was a report from the American Intelligence Committee, which was published much later, which said that had the Indian Air Force been employed in an offensive role, the results would have been totally different. So this is as far as the 1962 war was concerned. After this war, the Tata Committee, which was there, they recommended that the Air Force should be a 64 squadron force, which would comprise of 48 combat squadrons, one heavy bomber, and 15 transport squadrons. But despite the lessons of 62, the higher defense organization once again in the 65 war, the Chief of Staff's committee and the Emergency Cabinet Committee did not seem to have met, and there's no recorded evidence in history of this happening. The army did not take the Air Force along in its planning. There was total absence of joint planning and coordination between both the services, and whatever happened was incidental rather than planned. And due to Pakistan's overtures with China, the China threat was looming in the background, and for the IF, the inadequate counter-air operations was a lost opportunity. The absence of a clear-cut operational air power employment doctrine and the continued lack of taking the Indian Air Force on board in both operational planning and conduct of operations was reflected in the final outcome. The main outcome, Pak plan to annex Kashmir, was foiled, and the war restored the confidence and morale of its military and the faith of the nation, especially after the 62 debacle. This war served as an immense learning experience, and the mistakes made for it, Air Force implemented them. It was the first time that the Indian Air Force actually was bloodied in a conflict in the jet era against a very skilled adversary. So, having learned from these lessons, we went into the 1971 war where there was adequate preparation time with clear political directions, and there was excellent joint planning and conduct of operations. The Air Force's strategy and CONOPS proved very successful. In the east, we attained air superiority, and in the western sector, there was a favorable air situation. Now, in the forward tactical battle area and the depth areas, we disrupted the north-south communication in the western sector, and this played an important role in providing the army and navy total freedom from enemy opposition. A fall of Dhaka also happened because of relentless airstrikes, and without air power, actually, this could have led to a long, drawn-out battle in built-up areas with delays on both sides. Now, the Air Force undertook this Meghna River crossing, the Tangel paradrop, and the thwarting of three major enemy armored thrusts at Cham, Fazilka, and Longewala. They are classical examples of the efficacy of air power. And I think the leadership in this of the Meghna crossing was actually legendary. Uh, the Air Force carried out strategic bombing, bombing the fuel depot at Karachi, the Attock refinery, the Sui gas plant, and all this affected Pakistan fuel resource and power generation capacity considerably. A longer war, if had it continued, would actually have been a disaster for Pakistan. There are some tanks which fled, because there was no ammunition, and this was the first time that there was unfettered employment of air power in a war by India, which enabled swift and decisive outcome in a high intensity campaign. Air power not only prevailed over the enemy, it force multiplied the surface campaign towards actually defeating the enemy. Two nations went to war and three emerged, and 93,000 prisoners of war. This was the longest after World War ever recorded in history. Post that, we come to the Kargil conflict, which was a specialized high altitude application of air power in the highest battlefield of the world in Kargil, which gave the Indian Air Force the opportunity to do what it was restricted from in the 1962 war with China. Extensive weapon delivery at extremes of aircraft and armament performance limits in a hostile SAM environment, and the possibility of air opposition from the adversary. The the political restraint of not crossing the line of control, at limited the offensive actions that the Air Force could take. The Air Force actually flew over 7,000 sorties in 6 weeks in the world's first use of combat power above 15,000 feet. The Pakistani Air Force was deployed at Skardu. There was extensive air defense by the Air Force, which enabled, freedom of surface and air operations. And actually, Pakistan failed to assess the employment of air power and the capability of the Indian Air Force and the determination of the Indian Army. So there were many lessons. The Air Force improvised on the go. The lightning pod was integrated. The LGBs, the paper kits were put on the dumb bombs. So a lot happened in these areas. Now, when we look at some of the key assessments, on the employment of air power by India, now, if you look at the relative youth of air power compared to land and sea power, led to its reluctant but inevitable acceptance as a potent military instrument of power. Uh, Militaries the world over recognize the need for air power to be an independent military arm post World War II, and this happened in India also, albeit reluctantly. Air power, being the most technology intensive, saw the largest and swiftest technological advancements in war fighting capabilities and capacities. We You all wanted to know the induction of the Mirage 2000 and the Su-30s. I think Mirage 2000 was the first fly-by-wire aircraft which was inducted in the Air Force. It proved itself in the Kargil conflict. The induction of Su-30s was also a game changer. Today, the Air Force comprises of, Indian Air Force. Majority of the fleet is are the Su-30s only. We come to Operation Sindoor, which which just happened in the month of May after the terror attack at Pahalgam. I think this after the Balakot strike, which was the first instance in February 2019 after the Pulwama terror attack, the Air Force was used in an offensive role, crossing the international border to carry out a strike at a Pak terror training infrastructure. This time, after 6 years, when this attack happened, I think there was great I mean, the expectations were there that the Air Force would take punitive action against Pakistan, and it did after a gap of almost 14 days. When on the night of 6th, 7th May, the Air Force Indian Armed Forces struck 9 terror camps inside Pakistan, striking at the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the Lashkar-e-Toiba headquarters at Bahawalpur and Muridke. Now, post the Pakistani retaliation on the night of 9th and early morning on 10th May, 11 airfields across Pakistan were struck. The heartland of Pakistan was struck, with impunity and with disastrous effects, which actually called, for a surrender by the Pakistan DGMO. Now, what are the lessons that we learn out of it? And you look at the doctrinal shift in the employment of EPA. I think what the political leadership has clearly understood is that this is an instrument of force which is readily available to the political establishment from its, quiver of the military instrument, because the armies would take long to mobilize. Similarly, so is the case for the Navy. The Air Force, because of its reach, flexibility, precision, lethality, and all these factors, was could easily be utilized to give, deterrence by punishment. And the fact that India is called, that any act of terror is going to be an act of war is a paradigm shift in India's strategy with its neighbor Pakistan. The other lesson that we learned is that the collusion between China, Turkey, and Pakistan is active. It is here to stay. And when India is looking at a next conflict, it is looking at one front but multiple enemies. China and Turkey included. So, what is it that the Indian Air Force or Indian Air Power needs to do? I think we need to invest in the Air Force at better late than never, because there is a lot that needs to be done to build up the capacity and the capability of the Indian Air Force. We have to be self-sufficient, because nobody is going to come and stand with you in times of conflict. And I think the biggest realization is that you are alone in this fight, and there is nobody else who's going to assist you, and we have to build our own capability. So I just like to stop over here, coming to the end of my time of 20 minutes, but I'll be more than happy to answer any questions subsequently in the Q&A section. So over to you, Anjali.
Respected sir, thank you very much. It was truly an honor and a profound privilege to have had the opportunity to listen to your deeply insightful and thought provoking perspectives on the remarkable transformation of the Indian Air Force. Now respected Air Marshal Anil Khosla sir, I kindly invite you to take the stage and provide us with an insightful view on the contemporary deployment of the Indian Air Force in real world operations. with a comprehensive analysis of how India's air power is being strategically leveraged both as a military instrument and a diplomatic asset in the 21st century warfare. Sir, we indeed also seek your expert perspective upon the preparedness of the IAF in addressing threats posed by regional adversaries like China and Pakistan. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So thank you at the outset, India Netizens, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity and being with the very distinguished panels of my very able colleagues. And thank you, Priya, for reaching out, and Anjali and Soumya for the kind words. And you've given me a tall order. Golani could do it. He could compress 93 years of Indian Air Force progress in 20 minutes. I find it difficult to cover the present situation, the four issues, aspects which you have asked me to cover, but I will try. First one is the use of air power in punitive, as a punitive deterrence strategy of punitive deterrence, which Anil Golani has already touched upon a little bit. What are the readiness to meet with the challenges and threats in the present day scenario, that is Pakistan and China? Integration of our combat enablers, that is force multipliers like FRA, AVAX, drones, and those which are very, very important combat enablers, and the role of air power in the peacetime, that is HADR, as well as diplomacy and aid to civil. Each is a topic in itself for a seminar. So let me see if I can compress it. Only thing is, I'll warn you that I'll have to go hypersonic. So be with me. I'll have to go very fast. And I will just tag issues and not go into lengthy explanations. Looking forward to the Q&A section and the interaction, which is the best part of any seminar. Okay, coming to the first part, which where Golani had left, I will take over from there. As he said, the air power is the ideal instrument for punitive strategy, that is deterrence by punishment. And he's already listed few of the reasons, but the reasons are very straightforward. The speed with which air force can react, that is number one. Number two, a standoff very far away, you can deliver punitive punishment. So that is number two. Number three is big precision capability, that is no collateral damage. So that is a very big advantage. Fourth is the effect-based operations conducted by the Air Force. Whatever target you want, what effect do you want? You want to kill people, or you want to destroy it, or you want to be symbolic? Whatever effect you ask, depending on that, Air Force can deliver. And the most important part of the reason is that it gives the decision makers a lot of choices. The options. It's an option generator. Depending on what you want to, what effect you want a rap on the knuckle, or slap on the face, or punch on the nose, Air Force can deliver. Like Uri was, you can say, rap on the knuckle, Balakot was slap on the face, and Sindoor has been punch on the nose. So it all depends on what targets do you choose, where are these targets located, number of targets, what sort of destruction, what sort of weight of effect you want on these targets. So all this gives you various options, various shades of punitive action. So that is the biggest advantage. Okay, in our contest, air power was considered escalatory. That's why earlier it was not being used. And Balakot actually broke that myth that air power is escalatory. The escalation could be controlled even after the punitive action over Jaish-e-Mohammed camp. And it was the first time Indian Air Force was used in this role, which we are facing every day, the terrorism, the act of terrorism from Pakistan sponsored, with their policy of bleed India by 1,000 cuts, having failed, meet their objectives through various wars, as Golani listed out earlier. So message through Balakot was very clear. Our patience has run out. The cost of terrorism will go up, and our fight against terrorism and not common people. That's why we are attacking military and terror camps and terror organization targets. Okay, so for some time behavior took place, but then they say that desperate men during desperate situations do desperate actions, and that is what has happened. The Pakistan situation was desperate. Desperate man, Asim Munir, his tenure was coming to an end. Pakistan was in doldrums economically, diplomatically, internal issues, external issues, all sort of things. The ideal thing is India bogey, Kashmir bogey, and that's how Sindoor happened. But this time they crossed a very, very big red line. The act which they conducted was very, very heinous, inhuman, and appropriate response was given. 9 targets were hit in the phase one. I have divided into 3 phases. That is, phase one, 9 targets were hit. All sort of terrorist camps were hit within POK, outside POK, in the heartland, 2 headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed and LET, Lashkar-e-Toiba, the terror training camps, the camp where the suicide terrorists were trained, logistic camps, launch pads, all sort of terrorist camps were attacked. And yet India gave a window to Pakistan, saying that this is against terrorist camp. We haven't touched your military or civil. Behave yourself. Take some action. If you retaliate, we will return back in a bigger way. They didn't listen to us. They had to save face. And what will they attack? They attacked our civilian and military targets, 26 to 36 of these targets, and thousands of drones, which were neutralized effectively. And over 2 days, instead of de-escalating, they kept escalating and started using bigger and bigger missiles and standoff weapons. Time had come for phase three, where another lesson had to be given, and 13 various targets north to south, east to west were attacked on 10th morning. And all sort of targets were attacked, the airfield runways, the hangars, the command and control centers, even underground facilities. You name it. And the message was very, very clear. Wherever you are, whatever you have, we can attack effectively. And hopefully this time the sense prevailed and they asked for a ceasefire. And red lines were clearly drawn subsequently by the Prime Minister's speech that cost, we have patience has run out, the cost will be high. Any terror act, as Golani said earlier, will be act of war. And no trade and terror will go along, no blood and water will flow together. So all sort of cost will be imposed, not only in kinetic domain, that is military, in non-kinetic domain as well. No diplomatic ties, no trade, and every type of punitive action will be committed. Recently, even the cricket team has refused to play with Pakistan and walked out of a major tournament. That kind of sentiments exist in the country at the moment for this anti-terror attack for which Indian Air Force is being used. And these two, Balakot and Op Sindoor, 2-3 myths have been broken. One is that air power is not escalatory, it can be controlled. And second is the nuclear saber rattling, which Pakistan used to do with one nuclear saber in his hand and, giving terror punch from below. So that myth has been broken, that despite you having nuclear weapons, there is a space available for punitive deterrence. So that is where our air power utilization considers. And Golani has brought out all the major lessons. As far as air power is concerned, I think the time has come for increasing precision standoff capability, as well as drones, loitering munitions and kamikaze drones, FPZ, missiles, long-range vectors, hypersonics. So all those lessons is already summed it up. Okay, I will move to the second part of my this thing. You had asked me to how the Indian Air Force is poised towards existing threats and challenges. So before I cover that, I want to cover one term which is called minimum deterrence value. So minimum deterrence value is, like your enemy will think 5 times before taking any action against you if you have high deterrence capability. And it all depends on number of enemies you have, what kind of capability they have, and thirdly, what is their attitude. So we have 2 nuclear powered enemies, cartographic mischief by the Britishers. We can't do anything about it, but to deal with them, China and Pakistan. And as far as capability is concerned, China is racing way ahead. They're racing with USA. They want to aspiring to be world number 1 by 2049. They're really going ahead, and they're a collusion with Pakistan, and they're pulling Pakistan ahead also. So what is happening? We are somewhere in between. So our gap with China is increasing, whereas the Pakistan is catching up with us. That is where we stand. Attitude, you can know Pakistan has always been hostile towards India. It suits them well. China was earlier benign. They didn't want to have wars and skirmishes or whatever you want to call it. But lately, about last 10-15 years, they've been a bit aggressive. And during pandemic also, they were aggressive towards whole entire world, wolf diplomacy, which was called. And if you see, every 3 to 4 years, a major skirmish happens, even with China now. Chumar happened, then Doklam happened, and then Galwan happened. I think Galwan was a wake-up call for us. We woke up, but a bit late. Anyway, so IAF as far as IAF readiness is concerned, so there are two things: capability and capacity. So capability wise, we are doing very well. We are progressing very well. We have very improved strategic airlift capability. Galwan, everyone was astonished at how fast we reacted and inducted forces. Our reach, our standoff, our precision capabilities increased manifold. Our operations, all weather, day and night, has improved. Whether both Balakot and Sindhur were undertaken at night, early in the morning. There are other reasons for it. Our electronic warfare, cyber and space capabilities are also increasing. Only pace needs to be higher. Our high altitude operation capabilities are increasing. We are a highly networked force. So these capabilities wise, we are doing quite well. It is the capacity which we need to address. When I say capacity, it means it's got a direct relevance to the war endurance. How long can we sustain the war? That is what it means. Our fighter strength, everyone knows, is a bit on the lower side. And Golani brought out that 64 sconds were earmarked, but that was way back. Now we need to do a fresh, but we don't even have the old figures at the moment. So that is one. Even our force enablers are lower in strength. So this is the major thing we need to work on. As far as China is concerned, numerically way ahead. They're already talking about sixth and fifth generation fighter aircraft. Their modernization is very, very focused, time bound and monetarily supported, technologically induced, and technology has been induced in a big way. And they're working on expeditionary capabilities, spending more money and effort on Indian Navy and in the Indian Air Force. Their strengths include indigenous defense industry, which we are still struggling to be Atmanirbhar or self-reliant. Their military-civil fusion in 6 odd verticals is a very, very strong this thing. We are still working on jointness. They have gone into fusion phase. They're working on non-contact warfare because they're adverse to body bags. They are investing heavily on drones and long-range vectors and missiles. They have a second artillery as a separate service altogether. They're working on multi-domain warfare in cyber, space, information, and electronic warfare. They have mastered the art of gray zone warfare, where anything and everything can be converted and used as a weapon. Their weaknesses is they're not battle hardened, they're not less experienced, and terrain is to their disadvantage, which they're trying to come over with technology. The human factor is very, very important, where we have very strong training, tactics, doctrine, and motivation, morale. This is where we are ahead. So as far as India is concerned, we are concerned, we neglected our modernization for quite a few years. Not much of induction took place. But also the lessons which have come out of all the recent wars is that self-reliance is the only answer. You take any major power in the world, it's got a well-established defense industry. And self-reliance, not only in the defense industry, even in a broader sense, even chip warfare is thing. We have been leapfrogging, but it's not worked properly. I think the lack of impetus from top-down approach was lacking. I think Galwan has woken us up. In last 10 years, whatever actions we are doing, they're showing result, but we need to go from fifth gear to maybe sixth gear or higher than that. And we need to spend money. We need to take internal help. Private sector is being brought in. We need to take external help to infuse technology, go into collaborations, which we are trying to do now. So we need to address the capacity in a big way, and capability for future, which I will not cover because I'll be stepping into domain of Marshal Choudhury. So I will leave it at that. For the future technology, we need to invest now so that we don't lag back once again, and the leapfrogging works and we don't have to do pole vault subsequently. Okay, coming to the third part, that is integration of our war fighting mechanism and platforms, instruments, and systems and weapons. So I call them combat enablers and force multipliers. So first on the list is the FRA, that is mid-air refueling. We need to have more in number. Considering the borders we have, considering the sea coast we have, considering the area we need to cover, we need many more in number. Second comes AVAX and AWAC, that is the eyes in the sky. They're not only the eyes in the sky, they also help in network-centric warfare, electronic warfare, very, very important combat enablers in the modern world. And we need to have, for round-the-clock surveillance, we need to have many more, which we are working on at the moment. Third is the recce assets. If you know the enemy where they are dispositions, half the battle is won. So we have enough tactical and strategic recce aircraft. We are also getting now I-Star aircraft, which will help in all the things except for the aerial refueling, which I covered earlier. We need to invest heavily in space-based surveillance, where China is way ahead. They have very good resolution. They have capability of addressing any area within 10 minutes, maybe lesser. We need to work on this. Then next comes our long range vectors. That is already covered. We are already working on hypersonics. We have already demonstrated the vehicle for it, and we need to work on it. Our missile program is doing well, and we should smoothly get into hypersonic weapon era. Drones is the latest warfare, mini, micro, macro, loitering ammunition, kamikaze, FPVs. We need to work on it. Self-reliant, that means we can produce production. Thousands and thousands of drones will be used, as being seen in Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine, and every type of war, even in Ops Sindoor. Not only drones, anti-drone systems we need to work on. As far as air defense is concerned, we are doing well. At a stage we were very low, but now the sensors and weapons, we have gone ahead. It's an integrated air defense concept. The scope of the air defense is expanding in both ways. That is towards a ballistic missile defense side, with hypersonics coming in, and on the other side of the convention, where sub-conventional platforms like small drones and parachutes and like the Hamas attacked Israel. So we need to have integrated systems where we can see far, we can see slow. We have multi-domain, multi-sensors, multi-weapons. So that is all integrated into a network. Our network is doing quite well, and our integrated air defense system did well in Sindoor, but we need to work more on that. So as far as network is concerned, Air Force is a fully networked service. It is riding on FNet and Air Defense's IACCS, plus it's got a whole lot of other networks and the utilities, not only war planning, war execution, war monitoring, maintenance. Every aspect is networked at the moment. There are 3 networks: air to air, between air to air systems, air to ground, and ground to ground systems, all are networked. What we need working, and we are working on, is that expanding this network operations to other services and other agencies who Air Force deals with. So that is in brief about our capability as far as integrating these systems is concerned. Now coming to the last portion, I've got 2 minutes left. The role of air power in peacetime. So it is equally important. The war basic of any defense forces basic role is to deter war, prevent war. If you're strong enough, automatically enemy gets deterred. So that is one. So we need to increase our capability and capacity. So that's what we do in peacetime. We equip, we train, we review our doctrines, we review our strategy, our tactics. That's what we do in peacetime. But that's not all. In peacetime, we do a whole lot of other roles: nation building. We assist the civil authorities. We assist in HADR operations, human assistance and disaster relief, not only in country but abroad also. Then military diplomacy is very, very important. So I will just touch upon these 30 seconds each. So besides, as I said, training, equipment, peacetime, HADR, aid to civil authority, military, then we also help out in CI, counterintelligence and counter-terrorism operations by the ground forces. Then support to other agencies, NDRF, NSG, that is also Air Force does. Sustenance to Army as well as other paramilitary forces. Then UN Peacekeeping Force. These are all activities related to Indian Air Force as well in the peacetime. So HADR, very, very important. We have fires, we have earthquakes, we have tsunamis. These are man-made, as well as, there are certain disasters which take place which are man-made besides the natural ones which I listed earlier. Whether they're domestic, they're internal or external, Indian Air Force is the first responder. I remember I was Director General Air Operations when Nepal earthquake took place. Within 50 minutes, within 1 hour, less than 1 hour, the first aircraft was airborne with supplies. And next 4 months, we operated a helicopter detachment of 8 aircraft in Nepal, helping them out, reaching out, giving them supplies, giving them aid to all the remote corners of Nepal, and bringing back casualties so that they can get medical attention. It was one of the major big operations. I remember Uttarakhand flash floods, when the famous words of then Air Chief was, the rotors of the Indian Air Force will not stop till the time last man has been evacuated and help is given to the every corner of the state. So that kind of operation does Indian Air Force do as far as HADR is concerned. Aid to civil authorities, any occasion. I remember things like demonetization. We were lifting money which was required all over the world after demonetization. COVID, Indian Air Force was on the forefront, even after having problems with them themselves. They were, taking equipment and oxygen regulators and whatnot all over the country. Uh, so we give a lot of aid to civil authorities in every situation. Then out of area contingency, you've heard regularly, we got a large diaspora all over the world. Whenever there is a problem, uh, Indian Air Force extricates them, evacuates them, and not only Indians, even the foreigners. And the joke is the Pakistanis, they always say they are Indians so that they can also be evacuated, and we do get them also out. And some of these rescues or evacuations are in a very, very hostile and very, very challenging conditions. But Indian Air Force is always the first responder, and they do respond in a very, very timely manner. So last issue is the military diplomacy, which you asked me to touch upon, which is a very, very important factor. As far as foreign policy is concerned, military has got a big role and in military diplomacy. And every embassy has got a military component where defense attaches, depending on what sort of country, what interest, either from Army, Navy, Air Force, or all three services. Some countries got all three. And there are a lot of activities which are involved in military diplomacy, joint exercises of three services and the other services. India recently hosted a multi-national exercise, which is a big achievement as the Indian Air Force. Visit, exchange, training, exchange of knowledge, exchange of intelligence. Exercises also increase interoperability between the countries. Then equipment gifting or leasing or selling, these are also part of the military diplomacy. Then military arrangements and agreements, as well as alliances. So all these part of these consider, these are, even HADR is considered as a part of military diplomacy. And military diplomacy, to succeed, the Ministry of External Affairs as well as Ministry of Defense had to be hand in glove, so that the diplomacy and the foreign policy can be the same. Okay. Besides this, even when there are situations like in Pakistan context, it's called no war, no peace situation, where absence of war doesn't mean there is no hostile action, and absence of hostility doesn't mean there is peace prevailing. A lot of things can be done. Political signaling. If you remember before Galwan, when it happened, not only very fast induction of troops, every type of aircraft was flown in that area. That was a political signaling that we are ready, we are operational, we can operate in this area. So that is sort of operational. Another political signaling is Syndex, the exercise which is carried out in the part of Quad also. That is also political signaling. Okay, we are exercising with these countries, and we are increasing our interoperability. Strategic coercion is another. Every war, before the war breaks out, the force muscle flexing which goes on, that is also Air Force has got a big role to play in these. So semi-hostile role, peacetime and wartime, Air Force is always ready, and it's got a big role to play. Only thing is, India has accepted now that the Air Force can play a role without being escalatory, and that is a big change, and it's going to see more and more role in future. And future of Indian Air Force is very, very bright, because Marshal Choudhury is going to tell you what is the future of the Indian Air Force. So I have not touched upon at all the future of the Air Force, and let him cover the full details. Only thing is, three things I will say for the Indian Air Force. One is the capacity, we need to address it them urgently. Second is the self-reliance is the only way. While supporting self-reliance, we have to maintain minimum deterrence value. If required, buy from outside, but buy in such a way that it does not impede our self-reliance, but encourages us. And third thing is the future technology and challenges we need to continue investing. Otherwise, we will again lag back. Thank you for patient hearing. And I know I went very fast, but I look forward to the interactive session after the session. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable insights. Before we continue, I humbly request all the participants to turn on their cameras if possible.
Respected sir, thank you very much. It was profoundly enlightening to receive your views on the operational deployment and the strategic situational perspectives. Your rap on the knuckle, slap on the face, and punch on the nose congruity indeed makes the stance crystal clear. Your views have provided us with deeper awareness of the complexities and the dynamic nature of the modern aerial warfare and the crucialness of the Indian Air Force for the nation in peacetime as well as wartime, as you said. Thank you very much, sir. Now, respected Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury, sir. Sir, I request you to offer a strategic foresighted roadmap for India's future transformation into an aerospace power through emphasis on innovation, self reliance, AI integration, satellite space synergies, and the visionary institutional evolution. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anjali, and thank you, Indian netizens, and especially to Soumya and Priya, and to my two of my esteemed colleagues. And I will simply put one of the few air power thinkers that we have in India today. And again, as I think Marshal Chopra brought it out, and he with his enormous skills was able to cover it at hypersonic speeds. But I'm afraid I'll have to slow it down a bit because I'll just cover 5 topics, and some of it I will not repeat anything, but I will make references to what was been covered before. The first bit I'll cover was a little bit of India's unique threat to put things in context. Why is air power so important? And that's we need to understand that. Second is the expansion of air power and its transition to an aerospace power. That will be the second part. Third bit I'll touch upon is some of it has already been covered by Marshal Chopra, but on indigenous efforts and India's aviation industry and where we are. I'll then we'll take a look at institutional shifts, and I'll sum it up in the end with a future vision. So I'll start off with the beginning with India's unique threat. Uh, Unlike any other country in the world, I don't think any other country anywhere shares the kind of threat that we have. Two hostile adversaries, immense long borders, and borders with whom we are across our adversaries directly. And we have a long history of wars. We have had 4 engagements with Pakistan, one with China, and this border clashes continue. Tenuous border relationships add to this whole challenge. But what makes it different from the world over, and unlike, and I want to state this fact very clearly, that the air power lessons which are learned the world over are vastly different from India. Because most of the Western applications of air power, especially in the recent years, has been against practically nil or very limited air opposition. Not so in India. We have 2 strong air forces across us. One is Pakistan, which is a near peer air force, thanks to our reducing numbers. The disparity, the difference in numbers are shrinking rapidly. And the PLAF, that is a Pakistan, I beg your pardon, the PLA Air Force, the Chinese Air Force, which is one of the largest air forces and is modernizing, as was mentioned earlier, at a very rapid rate. But what makes it very interesting is that these 2 air forces have been colluding for a very long time, in the sense that for the long over a decade plus, they have been actively engaged in many ways, actually more than a decade when it comes to the aircraft aviation industry. Do remember, Pakistan's aviation industry has been actively supported and hugely helped and assisted by China, and they are co-producing platforms. The GF-17 is a product of that, and they have been continuously assisting Pakistan in many ways, especially in the aviation industry, in terms of weapons, platforms, missiles, technology, networks, and a whole lot of other equipment. So this collusion has been going on for over 10 years. They've been carrying out an exercise, exclusive Pakistan China exercise between the 2 air forces for over a decade. They started in 2011. It's called Exercise Shaheen, in which it's a win-win situation for them. So look at it in a larger perspective. The Chinese Air Force gains from Pakistan, from their Pakistan's experience. Combat experience is a fair amount of Western exposure. It has got raw exposure on Western tactics and war fighting. It has, and most importantly, they're getting insights and inputs on India's Indian Air Force and Indian Air Force tactics and concepts of operation. So that is an important thing which the PLAF gains from. And what does the PAF or PF gain from? Platforms, weapons, supply, assured supply chains. We have seen that panning out. So increasingly in the recent years, these exercises have reached a much advanced level of cooperation where they actually look at the two air powers, both the sides look at two air powers as a possible option of employment should the countries go to war. That means if India goes to war with either China or Pakistan. So this collusion is no longer a collusion, it's become a collaboration, active collaboration. Now this plays out very importantly in our India's threat scenario, that is in the continental domain, because most of our borders are land borders and our threat is real across the continental domain. But for too long, we have looked at the continental domain from a pure surface perspective. We didn't factor in air power, but we have seen that the two air forces have grown strongly and they are firmly entrenched in the military strategy of both China and Pakistan. And as was brought out, their deepest concern as of now militarily is actually the Indian Air Force. And it was alluded to by Marshal Khosla, when he says the speed at which we spun up during Galwan and Doklam actually worried the Chinese, because Chinese do understand don't have permanent deployments in Tibet region. It's a seasonal deployment, and they have limitations of high altitude, and more importantly, their air force does not have adequate offensive power, which it offsets by exploiting its rocket force in Tibet. So this is an important aspect you must bear in mind. Now comes to the important aspect of transition of the two air forces. China has already got its fifth generation operating. They have already operated in Tibet. It's pushing forward. Its sixth generation is already flying. Pakistan is going to get the fifth generation fighters from China. So what does it all mean? That means that China will have sixth generation platforms definitely deployed in Tibet by the time our fifth generation fighters come online. That is about 10 years later. And similarly for Pakistan, they will as well have fifth generation platforms across before we get ours. So there's a serious issue here. And this is something we need to bear in mind from our perspective, threat perspective. Then comes, let's look at expansion of air power into an aerospace power. Now, this was first suggested, the air and space continuum. There is no dividing line. This is a lot of debate which has gone on internationally, especially with the US Air Force and a lot of other air forces, where there's a clear understanding everywhere that there's no dividing line between air and space technically. And except for the Karman line, which divides the near space and the outer space, so which is about at 100 odd kilometers. So technically, there is no dividing line, and the air and space is one physical entity. But does that mean air and space are the same? Most certainly not. As we go outside into outer space, the characteristics are entirely different. But what is important is the aerospace part, the part below the Karman line, below the near space and touching the near space region, above. The most air forces in the world look at about, and in fact, world over, they look at the vertical expansion up to 60 or 1,000 feet. But the portion above that, which extends up to extends to 100 kilometers, also up to the Karman line, is equally important nowadays, because that is the transition phase through which the satellites, your space-based weapons, surface-based ballistic weapons, long-range missiles, they all transit through this intermediate space. So hence, this airspace has now, the aerospace part has become an important security aspect, especially for India. So we talk about air domain awareness. That means we know what is exactly, and which is what the Indian ISACS, or the Integrated Air and Command Control System, which is there, which integrates our air defense. It enhances the visibility of the India's airspace. But my argument today is that there's a necessity to extend this visibility into the aerospace domain. So this is something which I've been arguing for a long time, that there's a need for us in India that to build up an aerospace domain awareness, which concentrates up to near space, because space domain awareness goes into the space sector, which is an entirely different kettle of fish. So this bit is very important. So now when we talk about aerospace domain awareness also comes into the fact that air defense is no longer a defense from the skies. It's also defense from uh, weapons which are transiting through near space, and hence we need defense to transit into air defense to transit into aerospace defense, which was alluded to when I think Marshal Chopra talked about ballistic missile defense. So we need to integrate all this into one domain, that the aerospace domain. So these are the two aspects we need to concentrate in the future: is the aerospace domain awareness, and transit into aerospace defense from air defense. Another important aspect which I want to bring in, and with these two, with aerospace domain awareness, aerospace defense, a lot was talked about deterrence. Please understand that the most important element of deterrence is a nation's offensive capability to hurt another nation or hit another nation. That is what really deters another nation. So offensive capability or offensive air power is the real raison d'etre, the essence of Indian or any air force in the world. So air forces are fundamentally offensive. And when you talk about air defense is a subset, and it's almost like a twin of offensive air power, because it is offensive air power which enables you to target the adversary deep inside the adversarial spaces. You look at World War I, World War II, what a difference it was. World War I, the fight was only in the along the trenches, but by World War II, bombers came in, and that enabled air power to go deep inside continental spaces and target the adversary's industries, strategic assets, military assets, counter force and counter value targets. So it gives enormous capability. And I will end this with one argument that, we've talked a lot about what air defense did during Sindoor, but what has been missed out by most is that Pakistan came to the negotiating table not on the basis and the strength of our air defense, but the fact of our offensive capability of air force, which hurt them and hit them deep inside. So that is an important aspect, and why it is so critical to maintain this balance between offense and defense. And with three of these aspects, that means aerospace defense, aerospace domain awareness, offensive offensive capability, all integrated into a three-dimensional aspect, which now we call multi-domain operations, which includes cyber and space. That means the domain of warfighting is no longer limited. It encompasses all domains. And air power is most suited because the fact of its specific characteristics, it is an ideal the spine or the backbone for multi-domain operations, because of the fact that it can operate in the vertical domain with entire freedom. Okay, and one bit I'll leave you with, when we are transiting from air power to aerospace power and aerospace defense especially, do understand that, we have seen this in Israel as well, that even the best of air defense capabilities does not assure you 100% air defense. Missiles, drones, weapons, platforms will always manage to get through. This is a reality of life. So this is a common mistake we tend to make when we talk about air defense and we say that we need an air defense umbrella in India. Look at India's size and look at Israel's size. So, this is something we need to bear in mind, that there are limits to how much and what we can defend. Then I move on to the next section, that is the indigenous efforts. We have come a long way. Indian Air Force has a long history, Indian Air Power has a long history of aviation, but somehow we never grew past a certain point because of limitations in our budget. We do understand that for a long period post-independence, we suffered from a whole lot of economic issues, and then post the nuclear post India becoming nuclear, there were a whole lot of sanctions on us. So technology access was a challenge. We were forced to import equipment, and our choices were always politically driven. Do understand, it was foreign policies which dictate our choices and not necessarily what the Indian Air Force always wanted. So here there's a challenge. We made a fantastic platform way back in the 70s, pre-70s, in fact, and it took part in the 71 war, was the HF-24 Marut. Absolutely indigenous platform, phenomenal platform, but it suffered from the absence of a reliable and a good engine. And that is what has impacted us all through, and that continues to impact us today, and especially our fighter production. So this is something you all must be aware of, that today we are looking at. We tried a long time, we spent on the Kaveri engine, we experimented with it. Then we looked at international options, and now we are looking at the G404 and 414 engines for our Tejas platform, Tejas Mark 1, and subsequently for the Tejas Mark 2, and possibly the AMCA, we're looking at the 414. But again, to understand that we are at the, I won't say the mercy, but we tend to get held ransom by the fact that you rely on an external country who we have seen increasingly, especially the US with its present shenanigans and President Trump's very erratic foreign policy, that this is something which we will continue to face problems with. So we in our industry, despite our best of efforts, we have not been able to produce platforms in the quality that we really need for the future, and B, in the quantity that we are going to need in the future. Look at China. China today has reached a capability where it can produce probably 100 fighter platforms in a year, J-10s. That is the kind of capacity. Our AMCA, we can barely produce, our Tejas, we can barely produce 8, and we have not yet hit those numbers as yet. So unless and until we scale up our internal production of fighter platforms, after we have reached a certain level of success with the design, it's very important. Unless, I look at it the way it was talked about, the reducing squadron numbers. To my mind, unless we can produce at least 2 squadrons worth of platforms in a year, that's about 30 odd platforms in a year, we have a tough call going. Because in the next 10 years, there would have been an entirely different technological overhaul in the adversaries that we face. So we have a whole lot of challenges. And when it talks about, I think Atmanirbharta was mentioned, self-reliance most certainly is the way ahead. But there's a challenge in self-reliance and with Atmanirbharta. India's technological base is still not adequately reached a level where we can produce quality platforms which will see us through our needs of the future. We are not there as yet. It will take us some time. So when it comes to Atmanirbharta, especially when it comes to niche technologies, niche aspects in things like engines, radars, missile seeker heads, we're a long way off. So to my mind, I look at Atmanirbharta from a little different perspective. It is most certainly that we need to invest enormously into our indigenous capabilities in research and development, so that over a decade in the future, we can reach those levels and fill the gaps which we are facing. But that research base and development takes time. It's at least a decade away. What do we do? So in this decade, we have no choice. To my personal view is this, that we have no choice but to rely on external purchases to fill the interim gap one more time. We have just no choice in this. So this is something we need to really look at it. I'm sure the leadership in Delhi are looking at it from a larger perspective. So next comes to the logical thought is the future force structure. And future, before I go into future force structure, I'll quickly talk about drones and missiles. They have obviously become the darling of the media these days, and we know we love technology. So moment we saw changes and the kind of within reach technology that drones place us, we went a little overboard to my perspective as far as drones are concerned. Most certainly they have expanded the scope and ways and means of warfare. But do remember, drones by itself cannot create strategic effects which will win us wars. They will certainly enable us to fight wars more effectively, but not necessarily win us wars. So there's a very important difference there. And we have seen that. And in Ukraine and Russian war, we have seen that initially drones, they are actually dictating the outcomes. But why is it so? For a simple fact, Ukraine is forced to employ drones because it does not have an air force, effective air force. And it is a very small air force. So all its offensive capabilities are reliant on drones. Hence, it has fallen back on drones as a solution for its targeting. Russia, on the other hand, the Russian Air Force, despite excellent platforms, are doctrinally bound in that they don't use manned platforms or fighters for offensive targeting, in-depth targeting. They have never done it conceptually and doctrinally. So they haven't done it in Ukraine as well. And hence they have also resorted to drones. But there is no denying that today drones will create an enormous challenge. As to whether I will not take I'm very clear on one aspect, on the simplistic option which everyone says, and Elon Musk said it himself, that, drones are no longer needed. And in future, what he mentioned was that he talked about the, future platforms and says only idiots are, pursuing the F-35 program and things like that. But the fact is, every leading nation are continuing to make advanced fighters. Why? For a very good reason. Fighter platforms, combat platforms form a large chunk of militaries, of air forces, of air power. You cannot wish them away overnight. It'll take enormous funds and future technology to replace them. So I don't see them happening over the next 10 years at least. So manned fighters are here to stay. But what is important is that drones and missiles have also created their own niche. So effectively, air power has expanded. The means of prosecuting air power has expanded from what was earlier only manned platforms to now unmanned platforms and missiles as well. Then I come into the next part of institutional shifts. Important aspect here is, IAF, unlike the other services, rapidly changes its doctrine. Every 10 years we change our doctrine, and everyone wonders, especially in the Army and Navy, why do we change our doctrine so quickly? I'll give you a quick example. I think when I joined the service, fighters, we only engaged in gunfights. That means the air-to-air guns were our only weapons. And within a few years, we came to close combat missiles. The range expanded to 3 kilometers, 2 to 3 kilometers. Then came to all-aspect missiles. Range expanded to 5 or 6 kilometers. Then came semi-active BVR missiles. Ranges went up to 10 kilometers. Then came active BVR missiles. The ranges now have gone up to 100, 200 kilometers and even more. What has it made? What difference has it made? The difference is today your war fighting scope and range have constantly expanded with the increase in weapon ranges. This has brought in conceptual changes in war fighting so that IAF adapts to technology, absorbs new technology, better weapons with better capabilities, and constantly evolves and develops and expands its concepts of operations for the future. So that is where the doctrinal aspect comes very important for the Indian Air Force. And very interestingly, I don't know how many of you have gone through this. Available. It used to be available on the open domain, the IAF doctrine. If you look at it, in the No War, No Peace chapter of air strategy in the doctrine, No War, No Peace defines the conditions that we are facing with Pakistan. We find that in this period, the doctrinal aspects, two things come out. Offensive air defense. That means using air defense offensively. That means dominating adversarial airspaces and shooting them down in their airspace, which is what our air defense is capable of today. Our integrated air defense, which was mentioned earlier, I added a term to it. I call it extended integrated air defense ever since we have long range missiles and radars, because now I can look at adversary deep inside adversary space and shoot him down there. I don't have to wait for him to come and cross into our airspace. So this is one aspect which enabled us and great capability. Other is punitive targeting, offensive targeting, which was brought out. So all I want to say is that doctrinally, whatever the Indian Air Force works out has proven its path. That means, Air Force keeps with the world what's happening, and it is, I think, kept up with times and has been, relevant in contemporary aspects. One couple of quick words on, because theater command was mentioned and jointness. Do understand, Indian Air Force was joint with the Army and the Navy well before. In fact, because both the Army and the Navy need air power, and earlier it was Indian Air Force which provided this solely. To some extent, they have some of their own capabilities, but offensive air power and air defense are Indian Air Force's responsibility. So the challenge which the theater command is, the concept is essentially to integrate the three military instruments of force, that means the Army, Air Force and Navy, to be able to employ this military instrument as a part of a larger comprehensive national power in the nation's interests and in the nation's security. So the challenge which Indian Air Force faces is because Indian Air Force is inherently offensive. And so some of the concepts which the Army and the Navy had, there are conceptual differences, but there is no doubt with amongst the three services that they need to come together. A great progress has been made on this. And in this, in Operation Sindoor itself, it was evident how the three services came together, decided what was best, which service offers the most to offer in a certain set of context, which in this case was air power. And they allowed the Indian Air Force a lead role. That is what the future is going to be. And with this, I will, of course, there are certain challenges which you need to bear in mind and for the future, that the difference in numbers, this requirements of the three services, the limited budget, production capability, all will be constraints of the future. But I think at least for now, there is a huge clarity in people's mind that what is the way ahead, and there's a lot of focus on it, which is hugely encouraging. Now, I quickly sum up with what is our future vision. Air power, earlier air power was only limited to the conventional operations and did not feature in sub-conventional operations in its classic sense. Balakot was the first time we went across into enemy territory in peacetime for kinetic targeting, and it was brought out now. That seems to have become the norm. And what is encouraging is that offensive air power has come into the nation's security matrix, response matrix for the sub-conventional part of the war conflicts, where we are not at war with a nation, but we are in a similar to war kind of state, where there is no contact, but there's a whole lot of non-conventional or gray zone tactics being employed. So air power has come into feature in that, and that is hugely encouraging. Second important aspect is the offensive capability of air power has been recognized. Offensive air power has come back to fore. It was brought out by Marshal Golani, I think very aptly, that in 71 was the only time was unfettered use of air power. It is the only time we did strategic targeting against Pakistan, like he brought out on the fuel system, the energy system, and what's covered and what has been accepted, that actually Pakistan was running out of fuel. They were importing fuel from Iran within the 2 weeks itself, less than 2 weeks itself. So that is the effect strategic air power produces. And I think today there's a recognition, clear recognition in India of a revival of this offensive capability and the strategic capability. Industry, we need to invest a lot in it. There has to be a huge focus on it. The HAL, DRDO, they need to look from a larger perspective and look at their role in the aviation industry as an important aspect of national security. I mean, they have to look at it like that. They have to step away from a commercial mind space and look at it that they have to produce what it takes for the nation. And I'm sure we are capable of it. There's no dearth of it, but I think we are going through a transition phase. And do understand we have an enormous potential. It was brought out, I think it was mentioned about air defense capability. We're producing radars, missiles, weapon systems, which have enormous export potential. So if you look at it from a larger perspective, India has an enormous role to play in Southeast Asia and South Asia, in the countries around us in the Indian Ocean region, as a lead player in defense exports, because we can produce weapons which are cheap, reliable, and affordable. So this is something which we need to build on. So there are two aspects to it. One is the military side of development of the industry, and another is the civil aviation industry, which must, because there are large overlaps of the two. So do understand, when we talk, we essentially talk about air power, we talk about military air power, but civil air power forms a huge chunk as well. And the last bit which I'll bring about is that today we have no longer looking at the continental and maritime threat from a two-dimensional perspective. It is now being looked at from a three-dimensional perspective, with air power firmly playing an important role in it. It has an enormous role to play against our adversary in the north. over the continental spaces in Tibet. Do remember that while the A2AD construct, which China has, anti-area access denial over its South China Sea and Taiwan, it's not the same in Tibet. Tibet is a little weaker. So we are, Air Force has still enormous role to play in future conflicts. In the maritime domain, Indian Air Force has a huge role to play as well, which hasn't been adequately realized enough, because land-based air power brings a lot to the table. While the Navy has been talking about carriers and Rafales, they are a long way away before becoming operational. So the Indian Air Force has a lot to contribute towards peacekeeping, security, and stability in the Indian Ocean region. So with that, I think I'll end here, and I think we look forward to a cracking, session of question and answers.
Thank you so much, sir. Your distinguished insights have provided us with a strategic foresight and a visionary roadmap through which India can aspire to evolve into a formidable aerospace power. Sir, thank you for so comprehensively covering nearly all aspects we were inquisitive about, like offensive vis-a-vis defensive approach, Operation Sindoor, the air defense system, and evolving and evolved and ever evolving capabilities of our air power. Thank you so much, sir. I now invite Soumya to graciously facilitate the forthcoming question and answer session. She will guide the interaction, ensuring an exchanging and thoughtful exchange between the audience and our esteemed speakers. Over to you, Soumya.
Thank you. We will now be beginning with the question and answer round. Before we begin, I ask our Honorable Advisor Anil Jai Singh Sir to share his remarks.
Good afternoon. I don't have a remark. I have a couple of questions for the Air Marshal. I have no remark to offer. It was an extremely interesting session. I mean, all the three speakers were absolutely brilliant. I've come back. I've learned a lot about how the Air Force operates and about air power. We in the Navy keep comparing air power with maritime power, and that banter keeps going on between the services. But I think we've got to understand that all three are equally important: land power, air power, and maritime power, and they have to work. They have to be complementary to each other, and as has been brought out by Air Marshal Choudhury also. So my question fundamentally is on the. So you mentioned about our preparedness vis-a-vis our continental neighbors. While on the one side, I know we have great numerical superiority, and we've proved it time and again. But when the Galwan problem had started way back in 2021, one of the things said was that while the land forces are more or less in parity across the LAC, the Indian Air Force has a definite and a distinct advantage, because we have airfields right across from Srinagar right down to Kalaikonda, which more or less run parallel to the national boundaries, our national border. Whereas China, on the other hand, only had 2 or 3 air bases, I think, in Tibet and probably further east. So there was no doubt that the Indian Air Force had more capability, while China may have had more aircraft. But in the last 4 years, when we've been reading a lot about how China has been beefing up its infrastructure in the region across the complete LAC, and perhaps in the light of what might happen in a few years from now, when they feel confident enough to do what they want to do, have they paid equal attention to the Air Force? Have they understood that the Indian Air Force had a numerical and qualitative superiority over their forces, and are they addressing that in any way by either expanding their capability, positioning more aircraft, or getting aircraft which operate better at those altitudes? Well, what exactly has China done in these 4 years to ensure that it reduces the Indian Air Force's superiority or advantage across the LAC, sir? That's my question.
I think the Chinese have been extremely perceptive about air power for a very long time. For the longest time, we'll remember that China had one of the largest air forces, and it believed that numbers were deterrence in itself. But it watched the Gulf War very closely and saw the difference air power made to war outcomes. And it also saw very closely how well integrated space for the first time was employed in the Gulf War. And it took its lessons very, watched that war very, very closely. In fact, the book Unlimited Warfare by the 2 PLF colonels is all about this. It's about how we can make a difference. So ever since, Chinese Air Force has been systematically upgrading their Air Force. If you look at through their defense white papers, if you just go through all the defense white papers
Yes.
post the Gulf War, every defense white paper has clear goals for the PLAF. And what is uncanny and I mean, it deserves respect and admiration is the fact that the dedicated focus with which they have achieved each of their goals. And they've reached a stage where about 2 years back, the U.S. Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force made a statement in the Congressional Committee saying, General Mark Walsh said that by 2030, the PLF will be larger than the U.S. Air Force. And this is not just in terms of platforms, in terms of larger capabilities. Now we shift to Tibet. China's entire focus on building its air force was to bring in to supplement its maritime domain. If you notice, it pushed the US out of the first island chain and onto the second island chain. And it wanted to dominate the maritime spaces, but that wasn't enough because the US carrier groups brought in air power in a large manner where they did not have entire control of the airspace above the maritime spaces, and the mainland was vulnerable to the US air threat. That is why they invested hugely in A2AD, at that anti-aerial access denial. But they have created the strengthened the air force, and now today the PLAF is an important aspect of their. Look at the way it's being employed over Taiwan. 50 plus aircraft. They are regularly violating the median line between China and Taiwan, so that it doesn't. Its relevance is no longer of any consequence. So air power is an important aspect. China obviously realizes that, but it does not have enough capability to replicate the same over Tibet. And Tibet, do you understand, doesn't have the maritime element. So it's a much weaker air defense environment compared to what is there in the South or East China Seas in the maritime domain. But China is acutely aware of this. It's seen the changes. It's rapidly built up in infrastructure, large number of airfields. Is building a whole lot of assets there, developing, making roads, access lines to enable air operations, hardened shelters, ammunition dumps, fuel storage, the works. Point to remember here: whatever China does, and most importantly, it doesn't have permanent deployment. It cannot because of the weather constraints. So it's a seasonal deployment. So whatever China brings into Tibet, air power wise, do remember, let's say if they have I'm just saying, going by ballpark figures, if they have a number of 100 platforms, the capabilities which they can produce is probably 40. Whereas in terms of weight penalties and all that, whereas Indian Air Force, if it has, let's say, 80 platforms or 60 platforms, it has 60%, I mean, all 100% capability. That is the essential difference. But this will get more and more challenging in the future moment they start activating their bases more regularly. And this I foresee this happening, and I've talked a lot about it, that very soon you've seen me seeing border violations. Very soon you will see airspace violations on the increase in the future.
Right, so thank you. And my second question is again a very, very brief question. You made a mention of theater commands. I just wanted to know, as far as I know, the Maritime Command is supposed to have a permanent Air Force element in it, of Sukhois or whatever, the Maritime Squadron, as we used to call it when we were in service. Or the Jaguars used to be there earlier, so if you remember. But does the Air Force have the capacity at the moment to be able to dedicate a full squadron which is permanently deployed with the Maritime Command when the requirements could be more in the north? Or will it be a very flexible sort of arrangement where the Air Force will be deployed as required, when required, in the numbers required? How do you think this thing will play out, sir? If theater commands come into effect before the Air Force is able to replenish its
Well, I could answer
strength.
this, but I would leave it to, I think, Air Marshal Khosla, because of his immense maritime experience,
Yes.
to cover this bit.
Yeah. So you asked about theater command and the resources available to, split the resources at the moment. That is one of the biggest major bugbear at the moment as far as theater command is concerned, besides other aspects. At the moment, as I said, the numerical capacity is very low. The fighter squads are very low. And we cannot, dedicate squads in this way, that is, on physical or demarcation, and we cannot afford them to be sitting on ground. And earlier you asked a question about how to deal with China. China is a challenge, and China and Pakistan collectivity is a problem. And we introduced a lot of strategies. I remember 5 years, 6 years back, to how to deal with it during the, we did a very, very focused exercise, drew the lessons as far as China contingency is concerned, and introduced a lot of strategies, which I can't discuss here, of course,
Yes, of course.
to make best use of whatever we have and how to deal with the situation. And the situation was not that bad, but as Chow brought out, and as I also covered, in coming years, the way China is racing ahead, these problems are going to attenuate. It's going to create more problems unless we speed up our efforts, which we have already done, but we need to go even more. Now, coming back to the theatre command issue, I don't think earlier also, like I've been associated Maritime Con, I've done 3 tenures in Jaguars Con, 6 Con, and now we come a far way. All the platforms are sea capable. Su-30s are capable. There's a dedicated squadron in the south now. Rafales are capable. We have been doing exercises, getting airborne. When I was in Eastern Air Command, getting airborne from the east, doing exercises over the islands in the east, going across all the way to the west, doing exercises on the western islands, coming to Jodhpur, western sector, doing exercises in multiple, air-to-air refuelings, and then landing back. That sort of presence, that sort of reach we could do. So what I'm bringing out is that many more platforms. Even earlier, Mirages were also sea capable, and now the capability to operate over sea and address the maritime targets is enhanced many-fold. So we cannot actually give away a squadron, lock a squadron on the ground or wherever it is for the particular role. But I've also been AOC Mao, by the way, for 3 years, and that time also I said that we come a long way, and whenever required, whatever is within the reach of the Indian Air Force shore-based aircraft will be provided uh, once the joint is saying. Now our joint structures have come up in a big way. See, earlier it used to be service-to-service dealing. Now with headquarter ideas also coming into the picture, our joint, whatever you say, our jointness has progressed further. So depending on the situation, I think collective decision will be taken by the three chiefs in consultation with the CDS on what assets to be put where. And example I gave, Karachi cannot be addressed by single service. It has to be a multi-service approach. And if required, we will, I think all the resources will be put in to address the issue. So I don't think dedicated squadron can be given for treated away, but whenever need comes,
Yes.
if the situation demands and situation is worthy, all assets will be provided.
Thank you very much. It was really very illuminating, all the three presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We are also honored to have with us Air Marshal Ajay Arora, sir. Sir, we would be humbled to hear your insights on today's presentation.
Good afternoon to the audience, and special thanks and good afternoon to all the three speakers. Really, it was enlightening talk by all the three speakers. I have only one question. I leave it to the panel to decide who would like to answer. And it's a very brief question, sir. While we know that Atmanirbharta right now is not matured enough, that we could induct, indigenously built platforms in next 10 years, we have to work very hard. But something which is missing from our drawing board is the aero engine. We know Kaveri has failed. We also know that no country, no industry will give us 100% TOT. While I was in service, I tried my level best to make a consortium of academia, DRDO, Air Force, the services, so that all the brains can work together and we can reach somewhere. But this question keeps bothering me that what is the way ahead? What is the path that we have laid for ourselves to develop, and manufacture an engine for fifth and sixth generation aircraft? And I'm not saying today or after 1 or 2 years. It's going to happen only after 10 to 15 years. But what do you think, sir, is the way ahead, and what needs to be done? I thought it's only the way ahead is maybe we have a consortium or a very abled body which can probably work directly under PMO. Your views on it, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'll give it a go and then maybe I'll hand it over to Chow and Olu. Yeah. So it's a very catch-22 situation, as you brought out. Uh, Kaveri is not worked. It was converted into technology demonstrated, but we gained a lot from the Kaveri project, and it should not go waste. And at the moment, also, thinking is that yes, the whatever we gained from the Kaveri project should be utilized and not resurrect the program, but start developing onto this thing. But situation has come that we are in a catch-22 situation. We are not able to develop our own. We need it urgently. And as you brought out, nobody is going to give away his 100% technology. The reason is very straightforward. It's a cash cow for them. And only a handful, 4 or 5 companies and countries have this capability. And if they give it to you, you have become one of the competitors. Okay, now the choice remains, how is China achieving it? China is also struggling a bit with the Indian technology, but they are way ahead of us. The WS series, they have been flying over the fighters as well as a whole lot of other platforms. Their industry is much more developed. Even the Indian industry I'm talking about, they have done 2 things. One is, they Chinese believe in ends and not in the means. So the one is the reverse engineering, and second is the industrial espionage. So that is the way they have gone about it. In our case, I mean, I'm not advocating that we do that, but we are in a catch-22 situation. So at the moment, the only solution to my mind is whatever we have gained so far, whatever we learned so far, start developing on that. Number 2, we need to spend a lot of money. Whatever deal we cut with the external agencies, we need external help for definitely. I mean, that is for sure. That means you need some technology innovation, you need some FDI, you need some transfer of technology. So the best deal, whatever we can get, we should try and get. We have been talking to France, Safran for a long time. The money which they're asking is quite a bit. We have been talking to Russians, we have been talking to Americans, we've been talking to British. So whatever is the best deal we can cut, and it'll cost money. So be ready to spend money. Be ready to get best of the external, and private sector is already being brought in, and our R&D as well as production capability of the private sector should be complementing this effort. And as you brought out, the whole ecosystem should work in a cohesive manner, in a focused manner, and it has to be top driven. The time has come. We need to go into a mission mode to accomplish something. That is the bottom line.
Thank you, sir.
Chow and Anil, you can add if you want to add.
Only thing I would add is, I think it was already alluded to. Not every country produces everything. So the point I'm trying to make is that we have no choice in this case but to go into some kind of strategic partnership, which is a challenge because of given the geopolitical upheavals that is going on now. Who do you align with? So that becomes a challenge. And as was brought out by Marshal Khosla, that it's a very difficult. Nobody wants to part with proprietary technology, but there is also something which you have with that which somebody else may not have. So we have to work out a strategic partnership here, and we have always dilly-dallied on it because that was the priority. Was that okay? It is another thing to be done, but unless and until we have never made it that this was an urgent priority for the nation. We have reached a stage. We let 2 decades slip and numbers drop, and now we are waking up. So this is something. Even if we do the best of our efforts, I don't see anything coming out immediately out of this research-based thing. It will develop over time. Do understand, even like the US, when they first made the F-16, they actually made 2 platforms, the YF-17 and the YF-16, knowing fully well the Air Force would buy one. But when they chose the YF-16, the YF-17, the company, they went into the subsidiary developments and subsequently produced it as the F-18. So the point I'm trying to make is that there needs to be agility in our strategic thinking when it comes to technology. We have been bound by an archaic institutional organizations of the HAL and DRDO, which has killed private industry and competition and growth for the longest time. And they have not reached the levels of, I would say, what they should have by now. So strategic partnerships are very important, I think.
I agree with you, sir, because you mentioned about Marut. and that aircraft could not see the light of the day because of engine once again. So it's not the time to waste at all, and we must move very fast. Thank you, sir.
So, Golani sir, we have a question from Anamrita Banerjee, ma'am. She's our advisor. So the question is, to what extent will the IRF be equipped with hypersonic light vehicles or long-range conventional cruise missiles? And how might this shift the regional deterrence balance without escalating to a nuclear threshold?
So when you talk of IRF, you mean the rocket force.
Anamrita, ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir. Yes, sir. The rocket force, integrated rocket force.
So, okay. Firstly, there are no plans as of now for having an integrated rocket force. This is all talk which is happening. And when we look at hypersonic glide vehicles and long-range cruise missiles and all, what has been clearly brought out is that when you look at air power, the maximum amount of reach that you can get with standoff weapons is, you know, through the medium of air. So you have these, I think, air-launched cruise missiles will give you the maximum bang for the buck. And when you talk of getting into the nuclear domain, that is totally different. I think the India's nuclear doctrine has stood the test of time of a no first use capability. The problem comes in when nations use ambiguity like what China does. That is the same missile is used for conventional as well as nuclear weapons. And this is where the question arises, where any miscalculation can lead to an escalation where you launch on warning or you launch a nuclear weapon. So this is something that one has to be wary of. But I don't foresee any conflict. The last nuclear weapon in anger was dropped. Almost uh, how many about 80 years ago. So I don't see this happening again in the near future. And rocket force is still not in the offing as of now presently. I just, one more comment I'll add on the previous question on this engine capability. I think, in my opinion, where we have lacked or we have been found wanting is in terms of accountability. When you look at DRDO, HAL, and all these organizations, we need to have, I think when you look at air power, you have to look at aerospace power in its entirety, because India is the largest civil aviation growing market in the world today. So there is a lot that we are buying, from other countries. We have to capitalize on this to get into some kind of a strategic partnership, which has to be, mutually beneficial to both the countries, whether it's the United States or France or any other country, because these are the two big countries from which we are buying our commercial aircraft as well. That is one. And second is accountability. Unless you create some aerospace commission or some organization, where you give that person responsibility that we are giving you 5 years, you have to deliver, and these are the deliverables, and invest money and faith in that person or organization, we are not going to get result. We'll keep talking, nothing is going to come out of it. That's
I completely agree with you, sir, because GTRE alone is not enough to design, develop the engine, firstly. And secondly, GTRE has been non-committal completely. I mean, the way they have been shifting their goalposts and timelines, and now suddenly they say, no, 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 we have only KDE, we have no other engines on the drawing board. I mean, after 40 years of very valuable time that has been spent with them, we have invested a lot of money, and suddenly they come back and say, no, there is nothing on the drawing board. That's really disappointing. I completely agree with you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, there's another question from Anamrita ma'am. This can be open to the panel. What indicators exist within the IAF threat matrix to suggest that TLA Pakistan EW collaboration in missile and air defense domains is shaping the two-front aerial denial strategy, including shared early warnings, electronic jamming, or T confliction protocols?
I think I'll go first on this before I think others can chip in on this. Um, Air denial. I have serious reservations on the term air denial, and it has caught on a lot of attention by some writers, and conceptually, air denial is a strategy of a nation which does not have a capable or does not have a air force or air power, where it seeks to deny its airspace to the adversary. And Ukraine has gotten into it willy-nilly because it didn't have a choice. It has a tiny air force which rapidly went out of usefulness, and it was forced to rely on air denial subsequently. That means denying the Russian Air Force the use of Ukrainian airspace. But it has not prevented targeting of Ukraine. What we don't see, and in fact, if people, I mean, some of you all look into the targeting carried out by the Russians in Ukraine, you'll realize, apart from all the white noise that you get on, them hitting malls and hospitals and civilian population and homes and homesteads, look at the strategic targeting which the Russians have carried out in Ukraine. It has demolished Ukraine's military manufacturing capability, which is fairly important, fairly huge. It has hit energy system of Ukraine in a very hard way. It has hit its logistics, road communication, its mobility in a huge way. Similarly, look at Iran. It didn't have an air force. It has an air force, but non-effective for a long time. It relied on missiles and drones for its both air defense and its offensive capability. Could it prevent this attack? No, it could not. So my argument is air denial is not going to be adequate to prevent a serious air force which has got a serious offensive capability, and which is why I keep saying that Indian Air Force's offensive capability is the most important thing, because every air defense can and will be penetrated in the future. Yes, it will come at a cost. It will come with greater challenges. There will be different ways and means of prosecuting it. But air denial, I don't think is something which we should spend time thinking. We should look at building an offensive capability, strengthening our offensive capability, which is the real deterrence.
Yeah, Golu, you want to go ahead?
No, sir, you go ahead. I think probably they're wanting to know on EW Pakistan PLA.
Yeah, so Chow has commented on air denial part. I'll comment on the not only the EW. I don't know whether you meant early warning or you meant electronic warfare. Can you clarify, please?
Anamrita ma'am.
I think it'll be electronic warfare. I think which will be the flavor of it.
It was EW, so
yeah, okay. Anyway, I'll comment on the broader aspect of Pakistan and China collusivity. Pakistan has become a vassal state of China. Puppeteer. China has become the puppeteer and Pakistan is a puppet. Obviously, they have interest, CPEC plus Pakistan's geography is the biggest asset as far as Pakistan is concerned. And so China has really taken over this country without even, fighting, without, it's just total control over that country. Now, coming to this part of collusivity, they talk about the friendship is, sweeter than honey and deeper than sea and stronger than steel and blah, blah, blah. I've seen it at close quarters, the body language and the behavior. It's a marriage of convenience, number one. Secondly, having said that, even in Sindoor, whole world was watching and even China was watching, because for the first time, Chinese equipment, platform, weapons, systems were pitched against Western armament. Okay, so everyone was watching very, very closely. Then third aspect is Pakistan. Now the Pakistan military, if you see, earlier if it was, a mix of Western equipment, now it is predominantly Chinese, various figures float around 60, 70, 80%. But China has helped them in every aspect, even nuclear as well as conventional in all the three services, even their defense industry. You name it, they have helped them. They will help them in future also as well, but nobody is going to give them the latest technology. China is not going. China is very, very smart. They're not going to give them the full 100% latest technology to Pakistan. It will always be second technology. However, they will always help them in terms of sharing of intelligence, sharing of advanced notices, and all those things. They will really definitely help them as far as if anything Pakistan, if anytime gets into a skirmish or a conflict with India. So that is a given as far as this thing is concerned. Now, coming to the electronic warfare part of it, electronic warfare also changes by the day actually. The kind of systems which come up, the systems have anti-EW systems in it. So it changes every day actually, and their effectiveness is only, it's like cyber warfare. The new and new threats keep appearing, and the older whatever you have systems which can counter it, you only come to know when the actual conflict takes place. So electronic warfare is a evolving thing, and which changes very, very fast. And as I said earlier, the latest thing will not be given to the Pakistan. So I'm not too worried about that aspect, but I'm more worried about the collusivity, and not only Pakistan, now China is making inroads into others neighbors as well, which can become a big major problem in a broader sense. Yeah.
Golani sir, if you wish to add something.
No, I think Marshal Khosla said enough. I don't need to add anything more.
So there's another question from Sandeep Rao sir. He's an aerospace engineer. Sir, so he has asked, can the private sector harvest aero engines from retired aircrafts like the MiGs or the GANs or for the UAF space? This is open to the panel.
Okay, I'll just quickly give a little input on this. This has been talked about in a lot of places because we've long back and historically, I think the US had carried out trials on an unmanned F-16, and subsequently unmanned technology has gone into a long way. The Russians have for the longest used their old platforms as actually, you know, converted them into weapons in the past during the Cold War. But today's day and age, I think while it's an interesting idea and it's not a new idea, it has huge challenges because these engines, these platforms are all dated technology. Maintaining them and keeping them running itself for the Indian Air Force has been a huge challenge. Now, to develop them into unmanned systems and platforms will need enormous modifications and challenges. To my mind, while like I said once again, it is an interesting and innovative idea, but I don't see it has legs of practical use cost effectively and implementation wise.
Yeah, I just add two or three things. Chow has brought out very nicely. The idea is good, you can harvest it, but there are two, three issues. One is, numbers. Generally, the engine consumption is much higher than the aircraft, airframes. And Indian Air Force, as the squadrons keep dwindling, the platform numbers, not only engines, also keep reducing. The second is brought out very nicely, correctly, is the sustainability. How do you sustain it? The supply chain, where do you get the spares from? So that is the second issue. So I don't think it will be worthwhile spending so much of money on re-innovating them, or not re-innovating, I mean modeling them for a different use and not being able to sustain them. It will be a waste of money. However, uh, if to my mind, I mean, these engines can be used for learning something out of it. It will be more valuable rather than refurbishing them and using them for something.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
We'll open the floor to the audience. I think Krishna had a
Thank you, sir.
question. Krishna, can you please keep your question brief and who it is directed to, and turn on your camera? So, yeah, you can ask your question.
Yeah, good evening, sir. My question is to Diptendu, sir. Good evening. It's pleasure meeting you, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah. My question is, sir, despite the clearly recognized need for 42 squadron fighter strength in Indian Air Force, we still haven't reached this target. Could you explain the main reasons behind this shortfall? And additionally, what specific measures are being taken by the Air Force and the government to address this gap and move towards achieving the 42 squadrons goal?
Uh, I think it's a question which has kept Marshal Khosla, Marshal Golani, and me awake through our service lives most of our life, and we haven't seen any changes in this. If anything, the numbers have only been declining from what we started when we joined the Air Force with. No, there are many reasons for it, and I think the biggest challenge is two, three things come to my mind. First is understand aviation, especially fighter aviation, is an inherently hugely expensive business, and it is hugely technology dependent. So very rapidly platforms become outdated, you know, and there's a need to constantly upgrade the platforms. Now, how do you extend the life of a platform? Either, I mean, if you're a very rich country, moment a platform goes out of service, you by then you have already invested beforehand and for its replacements. But that works wonderfully if you have your own aviation industry. We didn't have an aviation industry, so willy-nilly we have always relied on, like I kept whatever somewhere down the line. I think I had mentioned in the beginning that the choice of purchase of platforms for the Indian Air Force has always been held ransom to the political, or should I say, the foreign policy dynamics of the time. So we were dependent on Russia. We saw how that has panned out. We've never invested with the US when it comes to fighter aircraft, and I think it paid its own dividends till now. France, interestingly, has been a very reliable supplier of aircraft, right from Mystiers, Tufanis, the longest time Mirages, the Rafales. So the point I'm trying to make is that for Indian industry's inability to reach a level of self-sustenance and produce own platforms, not enough budgetary constraints and political dynamics have put us into a situation. We knew well before, in fact, while we were in service almost 20 years ago, there was a study carried out, and all that was brought out in the study is all coming out, and it's all playing out. So we have reached a stage where I don't think we have, there is no recovery from this unless and until, like I had mentioned earlier, that you still buy certain amount of platforms. As much as we hate to, we have no choice in this matter, because numbers do matter. Though Mao had said it, but it is an important aspect that numbers play an important role. It's not always quality. Quality matters, but quantity does too. So I think the government has taken some steps very late, but albeit at least the steps have been taken. I think what was also brought out by, I think, Marshal Arora's question that gave a hint towards it, that we need to increase, and what Marshal Golani also made, that we need to increase the accountability of our industry. Our industry, when we say mission mode, it is more than a mission mode. They have to take it on as a sort of, what should I say, it's almost like the holy grail. It's a national security requirement to produce outcomes. It is not, we don't have the luxury of choice here. So we are in a very bad situation. There is no denying it. And it will be foolish to think that we can come out of it in the next 10 years. We won't. It will be a constant, because do understand, by 2030, the present day platforms like the Jaguars and the MiG-29s will also finish their life. They will, and there are limits to how much you can upgrade a platform. So it needs enormous investment. It needs enormous deep pockets to do it, and an enormous commitment. I think what was brought out very wonderfully by Marshal Khosla when he talked that we need a top-down approach. It cannot work at a lower level and institutionally. It has to be driven down from the national leadership that this is a national requirement. Then probably we'll see, more, what should I say, more encouraging changes in the near future.
Yeah, Krishna, I'll just add two aspects to it. There are mainly two reasons why we have reached this stage. What needs to be done already been covered in detail by Marshal Choudhury and earlier also. So one of the reason firstly, I'll clarify, every time this question comes up, I've been asked this question in a lot of seminars, there's always hyphenated Indian Air Force. What has the Indian Air Force done about it? Indian Air Force, the control of the purse is not with the Indian Air Force. That is, let's get one thing very, very clear. And Indian Air Force has a drawdown mitigation plan. What it means is that, the fighter strength is low. And how do we mitigate that problem? And every year it is revised, every year is reviewed. It is presented to the higher-ups. And this plan exists and it's reviewed. But everything costs money. Okay, let's now, first reason I will tell you is, the reason is very straightforward. One debate is gun versus butter, whether you want to spend money on defense services to buy guns and weapons and equipment and platforms, or you want to development. So development takes precedence, number one. Number two is that you have two adversaries, China and Pakistan. So all the time it was considered that Pakistan is not capable of fighting with you. They don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the economy. The economy is in doldrums. And China was not interested in fighting with you because they were concentrating on the development of their defense forces as a long-term plan. But all this has changed in the last 10 years. But damage has been done. The third aspect is, while we consider all this, the internal security was a problem, a challenge which was facing us in the north, in the central sector, Maoist sector, as well as in the northeast. So the powers that have been existing there thought the internal security is more challenging and issue rather than external threats at that moment. So that is another reason. And the last reason is that we wanted to encourage our indigenous capability and rely on Tejas project and subsequently Mark 1A and Mark 2 and AMCA and so not. The timelines have not kept pace with the expectations. So these are the major reasons why we have fallen short. And what we need to do, we have already covered. Mission mode is the word. Yeah.
Golani sir, if you wish to add anything.
I think the only thing that I need to add is that there was a committee which is formed, which has already submitted its report to the defense minister on enhancing the capability of the Indian Air Force, and this year is also being you know announced as the year of defense reform by the government of India. So hopefully we will see some action taking place by the end of the year, and there should be some plan in place to augment this shortfall, and we will have a clearer, a better idea of how the nation is willing to bridge this gap.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
So we are a bit short of time, so only two questions. Uh, I see Madhur Jay's hand up, so Madhur Jay, you can go ahead and ask your question. Please keep it short and crisp.
Uh, Thank you, Priya ma'am. Jai Hind, all the three distinguished military veterans, all the distinguished panelists, and all the participants. My question to all the three panelists will be, the first question will be, what role will the space-based intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance and satellite resilience play in sustaining Indian Air Force strategic edge in the Indo-Pacific region? And my next question is, how critical is the hypersonic missile defense for India's air superiority strategy in the upcoming time by 2035? That's all. Thank you, sir.
I think in this one, let's leave Golani go first. Yeah.
So as far as the ISR is concerned, there is no denying that space is going to play an increasing role in intelligence, surveillance, recce, PNT, precision navigation, timing, and everything. And presently, we just have 7 or 8 satellites as compared to hundreds of China, and our revisit time is less. But the SBS-3, which has been announced by the government, this space-based surveillance 3 program, which is comprising of 52 satellites, is supposed to take effect by the year 2030. So I think this is something that the nation needs to invest in, and it's only when this fructifies will we have this capability. As long as air defense from hypersonic missiles is concerned, as of now there is no defense available, and that is why these missiles become a threat. And you saw the the BrahMos, the damage that it did in recent operations Sindoor also. But to create a BMD is work in progress as far as India is concerned, and we are a very big and a large country, and we can't afford to protect the entire nation. Only certain VAs or VPs would be protected. I think Marshal Khosla would be able to say more on this, but these are my short comments on both the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, space-based capabilities, the militarization of space has already taken place, and space-based capabilities are permeated into every aspect of our life. And denial of satellites with anti-satellite weapons, either by hard kill or soft kill, will affect us in a big way, not only militarily, for kinetic effects, for non-kinetic effects also, and all facets of your life. You take any sector, starting from agriculture to banking to railways to aviation to anything, space has some role or the other in the aspect, and even the networking. So space warfare is a next big thing, and already in terms of anti-satellite, in terms of putting up space stations, in terms of hard kills, soft kills, work is going on, and India has also demonstrated some of it, and that is a future. That's why Indian Air Force also, and obviously the space is a continuum of the airspace. So Air Force also is renamed as Aerospace Force. So that is in keeping in mind the future of the warfare in the space domain. As far as hypersonics is concerned, it's an evolving threat, and always an evolving threat comes out with a counter for it. Like for example, drones. Now anti-drone systems are coming in a big way. Similarly, hypersonics. But it's more difficult than the ballistic missile defense. Ballistic missile defense we have at the moment, where we have long range radars and long range vectors. The only easy part as compared to hypersonics is ballistic missiles have got a predictable trajectory. So you can predict and intercept it. Whereas hypersonics, one is the speed is very high, you need to intercept them far away. And secondly, their trajectory is not so predictable. So you need to continuously look at them, pick them up, keep track where they're going, and also guide the weapon onto it. So a lot of work is going on in this. I will just, there's a whole chapter we can go on onto it. I've written an article also on that. It's on my blog if you want to read it. But two things I will like to just say. As far as surveillance, as far as tracking is concerned, space-based surveillance in this case is a big help. And also you need to have a multi-sensor sort of tracking system, and not only active like radars, but semi-active or non-active also, passive also. Those sort of systems and integrated systems are coming up. As far as kill is concerned, a lot of things are being thought of, hard kill as well as soft kill. And also one of the things which is being thought, which is where I found it very interesting, is 21st century flak, it is called, a sort of a material. It will be a very thin, very not very dense, very sparse sort of a material of small particles, creating a cloud in the path of the missile. By the virtue of the speed of the missile, which is 10 Mach or 20 Mach, even these small particles will do a prohibitive damage to that projectile which is coming in. So these sort of things are being thought of at the moment as far as anti-hypersonic weapons are concerned.
Two quick points. One is, imagery is everything. Visibility is everything. It's what you can't see, you can't fight. And that has become a huge challenge, especially these days. Earlier days, you could get away with, getting a target picture of a point in time and plan. But today's systems and warfare has become so dynamic that you need constant surveillance, for change detection, to see any changes in your pattern. So ISR, space-based ISR, I think it's a given. It's something which we have to invest in a much more aggressive and a much more futuristic manner. Because look at the technology gap which we are facing vis-a-vis China. I mean, for them to be able to monitor our entire airspace and all our landmass gives them enormous strategic advantage. So that is something which we need to neutralize, and it's not only on the landmass; it's also over the maritime domain, especially given that the importance of Indian Ocean, that is how important Indian Ocean it is to us, because it's our economic lifeline. So ISR, there is no denying it, but there is a challenge here. Space-based awareness, SSA, space situational awareness, is entirely different from near space and the airspace aspects, because the physical aspects are entirely different. The behavior of platforms in those regimes are entirely different. They're guided by different laws of physics. So the point I'm trying to make is that integrating them is an entirely different challenge. But what is important is to develop each and find the commonalities between them before we can probably get into a holistic integration in the years to come. But there is no denying, which I mentioned earlier, that we need to build up aerospace domain awareness, which is what I was mentioning earlier. And ISR satellites are a very important aspect of it. One aspect I'll just add, which comes out of what Marshal Khosla mentioned, is that ballistic weapons are entirely different from hypersonic weapons. So, weapon trajectories, weapon characteristics make all the difference. While we have a larger handle on the ballistic defense because of the kind of visibility that we can get and targeting that we can have, the profile followed by hypersonic weapons are entirely different. So the exposure time when you can pick up, track, and engage the threat, and especially because of its high speeds, become entirely extremely difficult. But there is no denying that that is the way ahead. And like you said, at some point, I'm sure there will be solutions which come in. But these are two areas which we need to bring in. And I think in the future, we will find more and more convergences between air, near space, and space, and to have a much larger handle of this domain to be able to leverage it in the larger national interest of the nation.
I see
Thank
Udbhav.
you very much. Thank you.
Udbhav, you can ask your question.
Great. Good evening, sir. My name is Udbhav. And so my question is open to the panel. So, sir, it's from a broader perspective of Indian Armed Forces. So we often talk about like self-reliance and other recent conflicts. It's clear that without achieving self-reliance and involving private sector, it won't be possible to become a dominant power in the region, as also Anil sir mentioned. However, if we look at the recent example, the Striker vehicle that India is planning to co-produce with USA, when we already have a better platform, which is WAP, is it not decentivizing like Tata and DRDO, which combined made this WAP platform, and entering like it won't like discourage private sector from entering and contributing in the defense domain?
Yeah, so since nobody is answering, I'll initiate it. Uh, you know, earlier the debate used to be all throughout when I was in service career. In all the meetings, the debate used to be between R&D and defense PSUs versus this thing. Generally all the three-star who are the decision making in the Army, Navy, Air Force get trolled on social media that I'll just say Air Marshals, like especially in the Indian Air Force, Air Marshals want to play only with the foreign toys. So that's not so. Air Marshals are also very patriotic. They're also aware of the money constraints and this thing. So all the debate used to be whether we should buy it from outside or we produce ourselves. That is indigenous R&D and defense PSUs. Private sector was not encouraged due to whatever reasons as we progressed after independence, and now the need has come. So what has happened is basically the DPSUs and the defense R&D, basically they didn't have any competition as such. Now by bringing in private sector, the competition has come in. But private sector also needs, they are also money oriented and they need firm orders. And one of the ways is, make for the world, make for India. We have been talking about self-reliance. You have to make for the world so as you become more and more competitive. Having said that, it's not so easy. I mean, there's already established markets in the world. A whole lot of companies are already established. To get into that market, firstly, get a foothold. China is struggling, China is trying to get into the world market. It will be a slow process. Now, as far as India is concerned, as earlier also I brought out, and Marshal Choudhury also mentioned, and that, we have started very, very late, number one. Secondly, the external circumstances have changed. So due to these reasons, we need to get into mission mode as far as these aspects are concerned. Okay, so to maintain that minimum value, minimum capability value, you need to procure from outside and yet procure in such a way that encourages your private sector as well as the whole ecosystem, I will say, defense production ecosystem, whether private or public. So that is where we stand at the moment.
A couple of quick points on this. I think most of it has already been covered. Just remember that any defense production, and especially from when it comes to the aviation industry, it has a very limited shelf life. It's not something which you're producing which is going to last you through, for decades and decades. And they will have to have legs for further development. And by then, technology would have changed. So you will have to bring in changes in the platform itself. So they are not something which is hugely, what should I say, unless and until you produce a winner, marketing becomes a challenge. You can just make an average product. It does not even meet the requirements of your services. So that has been a challenge in the past. So, but here there is another issue which comes up is in established, like was brought out in the DPSU sector. While there is a lot of push going on today, I find there is still a lot of reluctance in bringing on board, and there is still this dynamics between the private sector and the DPSU as of now. It will take some time to mature and stabilize. Do understand the private industry has to invest, has to put its money where its mouth is, and that is where the challenge lies. So how does someone produce an equipment which the company is not sure meets the, while it may meet the stated requirements, but the service may not be happy with it, and somebody, so this is a hassle. And how do you invest in research and development not knowing the end state? So this is the challenge. This is where a lot of hand holding has been suggested, a lot of efforts are being made. But you look at this whole AMCA deal, and where now it has gone to HAL while it was opened out to the public sector. So the question, to the private sector, the question is, who in the private sector would have pockets deep enough to deal with it? So take this on its own. So there are a lot of internal dynamics. I think we are going through a phase in our nation over the next 3-4 years where things will stabilize to we'll start seeing better solutions in the future. But right now there are a lot of efforts being made towards incentivizing the private sector. But frankly, to my mind, they are small bit pieces. They are not the heavy duty outcomes and products that we need to really invest in, which will bring in the real strategic changes in our defense outlook. A smaller equipment and all that, there is enough smaller private industries which can play into it. But to make heavy duty items or weapons or equipment needs a lot of effort from the government and from the private sector side, and there has to be some much more involved level of cooperation and handholding, I think.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Any other question from the audience? Or we can move forward to the concluding remarks. No. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that we conclude today's insightful and thought-provoking webinar. On behalf of the Indian Netizens and our Global Affairs and Diplomacy Research Center, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Air Marshal Anil Golani sir, Air Marshal Diptendu sir, Air Marshal Anil Khosla sir, for taking their time and to share their deep expertise and operational wisdom with us today. Through their talks, we have traversed the remarkable journey of Indian air power from its historical roots to the doctrinal evolution to its strategic utility in modern conflicts, and finally towards the exciting future as an integrated, tech-driven, and aerospace force. We would also like to thank our engaged audience, students, researchers, and academic practitioners for their enthusiastic participation and thoughtful questions during the Q&A. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank Mathur sir for helping us organize this session from the very start to the end. Uh, we hope this session not only enhanced your understanding of the Indian Air Force trajectory, but also sparked new conversations about the critical role of air dominance and in shaping contemporary and future security landscapes. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank Air Marshal Ajay Arora sir Commodore Anil Jaising sir, Major Raghavendra Yadav sir, Group Captain Mathur sir, and Anamrita Banerjee ma'am from the headquarters for joining us. Thank you once again, and we look forward to welcoming you for the next session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, and Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.